Okay, so far so good. Then let's go to the next question, which is about sustainability. Sustainability, as Andrea introduced, 10x2 is one of our values is sustainability practically. We focus a lot on startups, scale-ups that they have a sustainability angle, and it's very, very important. We see that a lot of corporates and investors especially are focusing on sustainable innovation. So I wanted to ask the panelists, how important is for startups, scale-ups to have a sustainability dimension in 2021? And a sustainability dimension for us is, do they have a focus to one of the 17 UN sustainable goals, at least one or even more? Or in other words, other people, they don't talk about the 17 sustainable goals, but they talk about triple bottom line: planet, people, profit. So who would like to go and answer these questions first? John, would you like to go first? Because you are working for a very sustainable scale up. So.
Yes, with pleasure. Actually, I've been working on the sustainability field, both from the corporate angle with Schneider, where we develop sustainability services to help our customers to be more sustainable. And with startups, which are actually have been created around the idea of sustainability. Nasecomo, the company I'm working most really with right now, is basically upcycling agricultural co-products through insects to feed animal and avoid a reduction of biodiversity, deforestation by soil. So it is a good example of the big difference of what sustainability is very often, I won't say always, but very often an issue between a corporate and scale up in an M&A. You've got the corporates who usually are very strong on sustainability-based processes, reporting, information, communication, but their original mission is not around sustainability for most of them. They need to produce cars, they need to produce people to move people around. Startups are the opposite, most of them. A lot of the startups today are driven by young people for whom the triple bottom line is something that they have already completely internalized. The mission of their business is naturally focusing on several of the SDGs. So for them, they have it completely ingrained, but actually very often with very little processes. So at the time of M&A, you got the encounter of big corporations whose mission is slowly shifting towards something more sustainable, but with relatively robust processes, never robust enough, of course, but still quite an internal organization and a focus. And whereas the startups consider it very often as, anyway, I'm doing it. I mean, that's my goal. I'm saving the planet because I'm raising insects, for instance. And the challenge is to go and match the two in their cooperation, because what you find very quickly is processes are absolutely not aligned and the missions are not aligned for most of the cases. So it's all that goal. The SDG it is something which is very important because it is a bit of reconciliation point. Everybody has them in mind, every organization has them in mind, and it can be a good entry point at the time of an M&A to align the processes and align the missions. So it's an interesting way to get through it, but we should not underestimate that the same way sustainability recovers very different realities out there, especially through the M&A process.
Thank you. I fully agree with you. Sustainability is a very broad subject, and it doesn't mean always the same for different organizations. And especially between startups and corporates, the meaning is different. JC, do you have any angle, anything on this point from your side?
So I actually have several.
Okay.
First of all, I think that the biggest ideas are the ones that will have the biggest impact. And from this point of view, I think it is theoretically possible for a startup not to have a sustainability angle. However, in many cases, I think it's almost unavoidable that a startup has some kind of sustainability angle. And the reason for this is this. If you're trying to make a big impact, and a lot of venture capitalists nowadays require a big impact, otherwise it's not worth investing in, right? So if the biggest problems we're facing have to do with energy, the environment, social issues, various other things that are covered under the 17 SDGs, I think it's almost a prerequisite for a potentially high impact startup to be actually addressing at least one of these points. And there's also a culture where the most seasoned startup founders seem to respect sustainability much more than non-sustainable things for their second startups. A lot of friends and friends of friends who have recently exited and exited big, I don't see any of them just trying to make more money with the second startup. They're all involved in like stuff like, for instance, the guy who founded Reddit. Now he's actually, he's cashed out, at least partly. His next startup is actually using solar panels to desalinate to actually reforest desertifying areas. And I see this pattern. Another like successful founder friend I have has actually gone, and now he's actually involved in like biomedical stuff. He wants to help people. So I think there's actually this strong cultural kind of like, you look up at things that kind of a sustainable or pro-social or something that else is actually trying to be doing good for society. You kind of like look down. And I think this is especially true after what's been done with data in the past few years. 10 years ago, everybody was like, Facebook is like, wow, it's such a good thing. And nowadays, people are much more apathetic about, ambivalent, I should say, about Facebook, right? So I see this like cultural kind of shift. So from that point of view, it does seem like there's a very strong incentive for startups to kind of like want to embrace at least one of these points.
Okay, thank you very much. Patrick, anything to add on this subject? Do you see a lot of investors focusing on sustainability nowadays as an important attribute before they invest?
Increasingly so, because the pressure is coming from the LPs. And I'm not saying that there was an absence of awareness of this even at the GP level. But if you have financial institutions, pension funds, so on and so forth, and because of a variety of reasons, but not least, their own reporting obligations if they're regulated entities, where they have to address sustainability issues, and they have to address that through the investment cycle that they are committing to, then that's pressure that's coming in, right the way through from the top down, in terms of making sure that sustainability is a core theme in investments that are made into the funds that they're investing into, and then in turn by those funds into the ultimate startup scale-ups and other businesses involved. So it's now gone to a world where if you wanted to, you would find it increasingly difficult to avoid addressing sustainable issues in your business. What it really comes down to is the extent to which you treat it as a core value, as opposed to something that you're simply complying with or trying to be accountable for. And it's the businesses that embrace it as a core value that are ultimately going to make the most progress.
Yeah. Anybody else to add anything here? Okay. So before we go to the last group of questions, which are the very juicy ones that has been asked from participants in the last one, I would like to launch a poll where I would like all of you to respond. And you will see that, let me launch the poll. So please respond to that. And in case you respond to another subject, then we would like you to write in the chat what is the subject, or in the Q&A. Andrea, where you want to have the subject?
The
the chat, please.
In the chat. In the chat, please write. If you have another subject, please write the subject in the chat. Okay. So we want to do the fourth webinar based on your input. So the more inputs we get through chat, the better. Very good. Startup valuations, yes. Okay, thank you very much. One more minute and then we continue. Andrea, please make note of all the inputs. Thank you very much. And here you can see, I assume you see the result. 83% they are interested about successful M&A integrations. But we are going to cover definitely in some way the valuation subject. And thank you very much for your inputs. So we go to the last group of questions.